I thought I had escaped the Sinclairs a year ago, but 10 minutes ago, my Ring camera alerted me to motion. My parents were applying fake tears while my brother Julian directed their performance like a stage play. They rehearsed for 14 minutes before ringing the bell, unaware I was watching every second. What I did next didn't just silence them, it exposed a $5 million conspiracy they were desperate to hide. My name is Colette Sinclair, and for the last 365 days, my life has been a carefully constructed fortress of silence. I live in a third-floor walk-up in the Andersonville neighborhood of Chicago, a place chosen specifically because it is everything the Sinclair family estate is not. It is small, it smells of old brick and roasted coffee, and most importantly, nobody here knows that my last name is synonymous with a crumbling real estate empire in Wisconsin. I work as a senior conservationist at the Viridian Archives. My days are spent in a climate-controlled lab, wearing white cotton gloves, surgically repairing documents that are centuries old. I like my job because ink and parchment do not lie. A 17th century deed does not pretend to love you while stealing your identity. A torn map does not gaslight you. If there is damage, it is visible. If there is a stain, it has a chemical composition. The past, unlike my family, is honest. It was a Thursday evening. Just past 8:30, I had just poured myself a glass of Pinot Noir and was waiting for a delivery of Indian food. The apartment was quiet, the kind of heavy, luxurious silence that I had to fight tooth and nail to earn. I was not thinking about Lake Geneva. I was not thinking about my father, Robert, or my mother, Sylvia, and I was certainly not thinking about my brother, Julian. Then, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a notification from the Ring app motion detected at front door. My stomach gave a small, involuntary lurch, a conditioned reflex I had not quite managed to train out of my system. I assumed it was the delivery driver. I picked up the phone, expecting to see a guy in a helmet holding a bag of naan and tikka masala. Instead, I saw a black and white nightmare. The camera's fisheye lens distorted the image slightly, but there was no mistaking the three figures huddled on my landing. They were standing under the yellow glow of the hallway light, but they were not ringing the bell. Not yet. I sat up straighter, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs that felt like a warning drum. I tapped the live view button and turned the volume up to the maximum. "Okay, cut, stop," a male voice hissed through the tiny speaker. It was Julian. "Mom, you are doing it again. You are wiping your eyes before the tears even fall. It looks fake." "I cannot help it. Julian," my mother's voice whined, tinny and distorted. "The hallway smells like boiled cabbage. It is distracting me." "Focus, Sylvia," my father rumbled. He was standing in the back, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I watched, frozen, as the scene played out on my screen. It was not a family visit. It was a dress rehearsal. Julian stepped back, framing his hands like a director looking through a camera lens. He was wearing his signature charcoal suit, but even in the grainy night vision, I could see his tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked at his watch, a Patek Philippe that probably cost more than my entire car, and scowled. "We have been standing here for 10 minutes, Julian snapped. "If we do not get this right, we are not ringing that bell. We have one shot at this. Colette is perceptive. If she smells even an ounce of bullshit, she slams the door, and we are done. Do you understand?" "I understand. I understand," my mother said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small blue bottle. I zoomed in on the screen. Vicine. She tilted her head back, dropping liquid into her eyes, blinking rapidly until they shimmered with artificial grief. She fanned her face with her hand. "How is this? Do I look sufficiently devastated?" "Better," Julian critiqued, tilting his head. "But hunch your shoulders more. You are a grieving mother, not a runway model. Look smaller." My mother obediently shrank into herself, clutching her cashmere coat tighter. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times growing up. Usually deployed to get out of speeding tickets or to guilt-trip waitstaff into giving us free desserts. Seeing it directed at me, through a camera lens, felt like watching a horror movie where you know the killer is inside the house. "Dad, let's hear the line," Julian commanded, turning to my father, Robert Sinclair, a man who once intimidated boardrooms with a single glare, looked down at his hand. He was holding a small, white index card. He squinted at it in the dim light. "We miss you, Colette," he read, his voice flat and monotonous. "Please come home. Your grandfather. He needs you." "Jesus Christ," Julian muttered, running a hand down his face. "Dad, you are reading a grocery list. Put some emotion into it. We miss you. The emphasis is on miss. And look at the camera when you say it. Then look down. Shame. You need to project shame." "I do not know why I have to say the sorry part," my father grumbled, crossing his arms. "I did nothing wrong. She is the one who ran away." "We went over this," Julian hissed, stepping into my father's personal space. The aggression in his movement was sharp, predatory. "We do not have time for your ego. Robert, do you want to explain to the board why we cannot secure the vote? Do you want to explain to Grandpa Arthur why his favorite granddaughter is still missing?" "Fine," my father huffed. He uncrossed his arms. He looked at the index card again, moving his lips silently as he memorized the script. I stared at the screen, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. They were not here to apologize. They were here to secure a vote. They were here because they needed something. I looked closely at Julian. I had grown up in his shadow, the golden boy who could do no wrong. He was usually composed, arrogant, smooth as polished marble, but on the screen, he was vibrating with nervous energy. He kept checking his phone, tapping the screen, shoving it back into his pocket. He was sweating. I could see the sheen on his forehead despite the cool October air. His eyes were darting around the hallway, checking the corners, checking the stairs. This was not just impatience. This was desperation. Julian Sinclair never sweated unless the walls were closing in. 14 minutes, I whispered to the empty room. "You have been rehearsing for 14 minutes. I knew exactly what would happen if I just opened the door without a plan. They would steamroll me. They would use the tears, the guilt, the weight of family obligation to crush my defenses. They would drag me back into their world before I could even take a breath. But I was not the same woman who had fled the Lake Geneva estate in the middle of the night 12 months ago with nothing but a laptop and a fractured credit score. I was Colette Sinclair, and I fixed broken history for a living. I knew how to preserve evidence. I minimized the live view and immediately went into the settings. I downloaded the last 20 minutes of footage. Then, I uploaded the file to my personal cloud drive. I sent a copy to my work email. I sent a third copy to a hidden folder on my laptop. Evidence saved. On the screen. Julian seemed to decide they were ready. He smoothed his hair, buttoned his jacket, and took a deep breath. He transformed instantly. The frantic director vanished, replaced by the concerned, loving brother. He nodded to my parents. "Places," he whispered. "Showtime." My mother let out a practiced, shuddering breath and let a single tear roll down her cheek. My father hid the index card in his pocket and clasped his hands in front of him, looking like a penitent sinner. Julian reached out and pressed the doorbell. Ding-dong. The sound echoed through my apartment. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen island and picked up my wine glass. I took a slow sip, letting the tannins settle on my tongue. I smoothed the front of my silk blouse. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. My face was calm, my eyes cold. I walked to the door. I did not hurry. I let them wait. I let them stand there for a full minute, letting the silence stretch, letting their anxiety mount. I could hear them shifting on the other side. "Is she home?" my mother whispered. "The lights are on," Julian hissed back. "Be quiet." I unlocked the deadbolt with a loud, deliberate click. I threw the door open. The performance began instantly. It was impressive, really. My mother let out a small, strangled sob. reaching her hands out as if to embrace a long-lost child. My father looked at me with wide, wet eyes, his mouth opening to deliver the line he had struggled to memorize. Julian looked relieved, stepping forward with a warm, open expression. "Colette," my mother cried out, her voice trembling. "Oh, my baby, we have missed you so." "Save it," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the air like a scalpel. I did not step back to let them in. I stood right in the doorway, blocking the entrance, swirling the wine in my glass. I looked at my mother, then at my father, and finally rested my gaze on Julian. I offered them a smile, a sharp, thin thing that did not reach my eyes. "You are crying too early." "Mother," I said, my tone conversational, as if commenting on the weather. "And Dad, you forgot to unclasp your hands. Julian said you need to project shame, not prayer. And Julian..." I looked my brother in the eye. The warmth on his face faltered, the mask slipping just a fraction. 14 minutes, I said. "That is a long time to stand in a hallway. I hope you are not charging the company for those billable hours." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's hands froze in midair. My father's mouth snapped shut. Julian's eyes widened, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. They looked at me, and for the first time in my life, they did not see the easy target, the scapegoat, the spare heir. They saw someone who knew exactly what they were. "Hello, family," I said, taking a sip of wine. "To what do I owe the pleasure of this performance?" To understand why the sight of my family standing on my doorstep felt less like a reunion and more like a hostile invasion. You have to understand the architecture of the Sinclair family. Much like the buildings we developed, our family had a gleaming, expensive facade designed to impress the neighbors. But the foundation was rotting, eaten away by termites of favoritism and neglect. 12 months ago, I was not restoring ancient manuscripts in a quiet archive. I was the vice president of operations for Sinclair Holdings. That was the official title on my business card. At least, in reality, I was the shadow architect. I was the one who knew the zoning laws of Cook County by heart. I was the one who stayed in the office until 2 a.m, cross-referencing supply chain costs and negotiating with union leaders who smelled fear like sharks smell blood. I made the blueprints reality. My brother, Julian, was the president. His job description seemed to consist entirely of wearing Italian suits, taking potential investors out for 3 martini lunches, and smiling for magazine covers. Growing up, the disparity was so constant it became background noise. Julian went to a private preparatory school that cost $50,000 a year because he needed specialized attention. I went to the local public high school because it built character. Julian was gifted a brand new Porsche Cayenne for his 16th birthday. I was allowed to drive Mom's old station wagon, provided I paid for my own gas and insurance. When it came time for college, the family trust fund fully covered Julian's tuition at Wharton, where he barely scraped by with a C average. When I got into Northwestern, my father sat me down and explained that the liquidity was tight this year. And surely, if I was as smart as my grades suggested, I could figure out the financial aid forms myself. I did. I took out student loans. I worked 3 jobs. I graduated with honors. And then, like a fool, I brought all that talent and work ethic back to the family business, thinking that finally, if I just worked hard enough, I would earn my place at the table. I was wrong. The end did not happen all at once. It happened on a Tuesday in November. Under the fluorescent lights of my office, I was reviewing the ledgers for the Riverview project, a luxury condominium complex that was supposed to be the jewel in our crown. It was the project that would launch our initial public offering and turn Sinclair Holdings from a successful local firm into a national player. The numbers did not add up. I ran the calculations 3 times. I pulled the bank statements. I checked the contractor invoices. There was a hole in the budget, a massive, gaping crater where capital should have been. $200,000 had vanished from the operating account. At first, I thought it was a phishing scam or an accounting error, but then I traced the withdrawal. It had not gone to a supplier in China or a contractor in Wisconsin. It had been transferred to a shell company called Apex Ventures. I dug deeper. I knew Julian's passwords because he never changed them and often asked me to fix his email when he locked himself out. I logged into his private drive. There it was. Apex Ventures was a personal trading account registered in Julian's name, and looking at the transaction history was like watching a car crash in slow motion. He had taken the $200,000 money meant for steel and concrete and bet it all on a volatile cryptocurrency and a series of high-risk short sells. He had lost every single cent in 48 hours. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the mouse. I printed everything: the transfers, the trading losses, the empty balance sheets. I marched straight to my father's office, expecting naively that this would be the line in the sand. I expected rage. I expected consequences. I walked in to find my father, Robert, and my mother, Sylvia, looking over paint swatches for the new summer house. Julian was there, too, pouring himself a scotch from the crystal decanter, looking bored. I slammed the file down on the mahogany desk. Julian stole $200,000 from the Riverview account, I said, my voice trembling with adrenaline. He gambled it away. The account is empty. We cannot pay the steel suppliers next week. The room went silent. Julian froze, the glass halfway to his mouth. He did not look surprised. He looked annoyed, like I had interrupted a good joke. My father picked up the file. He flipped through the pages, his face impassive. My mother sighed, a long, weary sound, and adjusted her pearl necklace. "It is not stealing, Colette," my mother said softly. "It was an investment strategy that did not pan out. Julian explained it to us." I stared at her. Investment strategy. He bet company funds on digital coins that are now worth less than the paper this report is printed on. That is embezzlement. That is a felony. "Lower your voice," my father commanded, closing the file. "We are in the middle of a delicate time with the IPO coming up. We cannot have this kind of hysteria." Hysteria. I felt like the floor was tilting. "Dad, the money is gone. How are we going to pay the suppliers?" My father looked at me over his reading glasses. "That is actually what we wanted to discuss with you. We know you have been very frugal. You have that savings account you have been building up since college. The one for your, what was it? Your own house?" I took a step back. "No. It is just a bridge loan," Julian chimed in. Stepping forward, he had the audacity to smile. "Come on, Colette, don't be selfish. The family needs this. Once the IPO hits, I will pay you back double. I swear." "You called me selfish," I whispered. "You drove a Porsche while I took the bus. You partied while I worked 14-hour days to keep this company afloat. And now you want my life savings to cover your gambling debt." "It is for the family," my mother insisted, her eyes pleading. "Your brother made a mistake. He is under so much pressure being the face of the company. You don't understand the stress he is under." I walked out. I told them no. I told them to figure it out themselves. I went home to my small apartment, the one I paid for myself, and turned off my phone. I thought that was the end of the fight. I thought I had won by simply refusing to play. 2 days later, I went to the grocery store to buy milk and eggs. I swiped my debit card. Declined. I tried again. Declined. I felt a cold dread settle in my gut. I pulled up my banking app on my phone. My checking account balance was 0. My savings account, the $80,000 I had scraped together over a decade of blood and sweat, was 0. And there was a new line item. A loan disbursement. I called the bank, screaming into the phone in the middle of the dairy aisle. The representative, calm and professional, told me that a secured loan had been taken out against my accounts to cover a transfer to Sinclair Holdings. The paperwork had been signed by me, but I had not signed anything. I drove to the office like a woman possessed. I stormed into the boardroom where they were holding a strategy meeting. I did not care who was there. I threw my phone on the table. "You forged my signature," I hissed, staring at Julian. "You accessed my accounts and you stole my money." Julian did not even flinch. He looked at our parents. My father stood up, signaling for the secretary to leave the room and close the door. "We had to act fast," Robert said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "The suppliers were threatening to walk. We used your credentials to secure a bridge loan. It is internal. We will pay it back." "That is identity theft," I said. "I am going to the police." "You will do no such thing," my mother snapped, her voice sharp as a whip. She stood up, her face hard. "Think about what that would do to us. The IPO is next month. If news gets out that there is infighting or financial instability, the stock price will tank before we even ring the bell. You would destroy this family." "You already destroyed it," I yelled. "Listen to me clearly, Colette," my father said, walking around the table until he towered over me. "Here is what is going to happen. You are going to sign a retroactive authorization for that transfer. You are going to take a leave of absence for health reasons until the IPO is over. And if anyone asks about the discrepancy in the accounts, you will say it was a clerical error on your part. You want me to take the fall." I looked at them, my flesh and blood. "You stole my money, and now you want me to ruin my professional reputation to save Julian." "We are protecting the legacy," Julian said, checking his cuticles. "You are just collateral damage. Colette, know your role." Something inside me snapped. It was a physical sensation, like a rubber band breaking in my chest. "I am not signing anything. I am calling the SEC. I am calling the police, and I am suing you for every dime you stole." My father's hand moved faster than I could react. The slap echoed in the large room. It knocked my head to the side, my cheek stinging with a sudden, blossoming heat. I tasted copper in my mouth. I touched my face, staring at him. He looked red-faced, breathing hard, his hand still raised. "You ungrateful traitor," he spat. "After everything we gave you, a roof over your head, a job, this is how you repay us, by threatening your own brother." My mother did not move to help me. She just looked at the floor, smoothing her skirt. "You pushed him too far. Colette, why do you always have to be so difficult?" The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the dust of a relationship that had just disintegrated. I looked at the three of them. The father who hit me, the mother who enabled him, the brother who stole from me. "Okay," I said. My voice was quiet. I was not crying. I was past crying. "Okay." I turned around and walked out. I did not go to my office to pack my things. I did not log out of my computer. I walked straight to the elevator, down to the parking garage, and got into my car. I drove to my apartment, packed 2 suitcases with clothes and my laptop. I left everything else. The furniture, the books, the life I had built in that city. I wrote a letter to the bank, reporting the fraud, knowing it would take months to unravel without their cooperation. But I had to start the paper trail. I drove out of the city that night. I drove until my gas tank was empty and my eyes were burning. I changed my phone number at a truck stop in Iowa. I deleted my social media. For the last 12 months, I have lived in a kind of suspended animation. I moved to a different state. I got a job that required solitude and precision, far away from the world of real estate and high-stakes finance. I ate instant noodles for dinner because 50% of my paycheck was garnished to pay off the interest on the loan they had taken out in my name until the fraud investigation could clear me. I wore thrift store clothes. I spent my weekends reading in the public library because I could not afford internet at home for the first 3 months. I rebuilt myself, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. I learned to find peace in the silence. I learned that blood does not make you family. It just makes you related. I thought I had buried the Sinclair name. I thought I had become a ghost to them. But standing there in my hallway, watching them perform their little play, I realized something. They did not think I was a ghost. They thought I was a resource, a tool they had put back in the shed, ready to be taken out and used again when the need arose. They had no idea that the tool had sharpened itself into a weapon. My mother, Sylvia, moved with the speed of a striking cobra, though her intent was disguised as maternal affection. before the last syllable of my greeting had even faded into the stale hallway air. She lunged forward. It was a performance of physical comedy, a desperate attempt to bridge the 12-month chasm between us with a single, suffocating embrace. "Colette," she wailed, her voice pitching up into a frequency that set my teeth on edge. She wrapped her arms around my stiff frame, burying her face in the crook of my neck. "Oh, my baby, I have missed you like crazy. We have been so worried." She smelled of Chanel No. 5 and desperation. It was the same scent she wore to charity galas where she pretended to care about wetlands, and to board meetings where she pretended to understand fiscal policy. It was the scent of a woman who believed that if she just applied enough fragrance, it would cover the stench of anything rotting beneath. I did not hug her back. I stood there like a marble statue in a museum, my arms firmly at my sides, my right hand still balancing my wine glass with practiced stability. I felt her body trembling against mine. A year ago, I would have crumbled. A year ago, I would have interpreted those tremors as genuine emotion. Now, I knew better. She was trembling because she was acting, and she was terrified that the audience was not buying tickets. "You can let go now," I said. My voice was devoid of warmth. It was the voice I used when a junior archivist mishandled a 14th century vellum scroll. "You are wrinkling my blouse." My mother pulled back as if she had been burned. She kept her hands on my shoulders, searching my face with wet, shimmering eyes. The tears were impressive. They pooled in the corners of her eyes and spilled over her lashes with cinematic perfection. "How can you be so cold?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We are your family. We love you." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my Pinot Noir, maintaining eye contact over the rim of the glass. "Your eyes are quite red." "Mother," I observed calmly, "is that a new brand of contact lens solution? Or is that the extra strength Visine I saw you put in 3 minutes ago? Or perhaps you chopped onions in the stairwell?" The effect was instantaneous. My mother's face went slack. The tragic mask slipped, revealing the confused, slightly irritated woman underneath. She blinked, the tears stopping as if someone had turned off a faucet. I do not know what you are talking about," she stammered, glancing sideways at my father for support. Julian stepped in, smooth as oil. He placed a hand on our mother's back, gently moving her out of the line of fire. He adjusted his cufflinks, his face composing itself into a mask of reasonable concern. "Stop it, Colette," he said, his voice dropping to a low, authoritative baritone. "Do not be cruel. Mom has been a wreck since you left. We all have. We just want to talk." "Cruel?" I raised an eyebrow. "Cruelty is stealing a savings account. Cruelty is framing a sibling for fraud. Calling out a bad performance is simply being a critic." "We are not performing," Julian insisted. Though a muscle in his jaw jumped. "We are here to make amends. Can we at least come inside? Standing in the hallway is undignified." "Dignity," I repeated the word, tasting it. That is a fascinating word choice coming from a man I just watched direct his parents like puppets for 14 minutes. I lifted my free hand and pointed a manicured finger at the small, black device mounted beside my doorframe. The blue ring of light pulsed softly in the dim hallway. "You are a tech-savvy guy." "Julian," I said, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know how these things work. Motion activation, pre-roll recording. It captures high-definition video and audio from the moment you step into the frame, not just when you push the button." I leaned against the doorframe, blocking their entry with my body. "I heard everything. I heard you tell Mom she was crying too early. I heard you tell Dad to project shame. I heard you complain about the smell of cabbage. I heard you check your watch and worry about the time." My father, Robert, made a sound that was half gasp, half groan. He looked down at his Italian leather shoes, his face flushing a deep, mottled crimson. He was a man who prided himself on his public image, on being the stoic patriarch, To be caught rehearsing an emotion was, for him, a fate worse than bankruptcy. "Colette, please," my father mumbled, unable to meet my eyes. "Project Shame, Dad," I quoted, mimicking Julian's earlier tone perfectly. "You are looking at your shoes. Julian said to look at the camera. Remember?" Julian's face hardened. The concerned brother act evaporated, replaced by the cold, calculating executive I remembered all too well. He realized the game was up. There was no point in feigning sincerity when the audience had read the script. "You are paranoid," Julian said, his voice turning sharp. "So we wanted to be prepared. Is that a crime? We have not seen you in a year. We were nervous. We wanted to say the right things. You are twisting this into something malicious because that is what you do. Colette, you always play the victim." "I am the victim," I corrected him, my voice rising just enough to echo slightly in the stairwell. "I am the victim of financial identity theft committed by you. Do not gaslight me on my own doorstep. Julian, I have the receipts, and now I have the video." "You recorded us without consent," Julian snapped. "That is illegal in Illinois. It is a two-party consent state." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Actually, brother dear, this is a common area in a private building, and there is no expectation of privacy on a doorstep. Plus, the camera is clearly visible. Check your case law. Or better yet, ask the legal team you probably have on retainer to defend you against the SEC." Julian took a step forward. For a second, I thought he might try to push past me. His eyes were dark, dangerous. "Delete the footage." "No," I said simply. "I said delete it." And I said no. "I uploaded it to 3 different cloud servers while you were debating whether Mom should look like a grieving mother or a runway model. It is already backed up. If I disappear, or if my apartment catches fire, or if I have a sudden accident, that video goes to Aunt Diane. And you know how much she loves a good family scandal." Julian froze. He knew Aunt Diane. She was my mother's estranged sister, a shark of a divorce attorney who had hated Robert and Julian for decades. Giving her ammunition against the Sinclair men would be like handing a pyromaniac a flamethrower. Julian exhaled slowly through his nose. He adjusted his jacket again, regaining his composure through sheer force of will. He realized intimidation would not work. I was not the little sister who sought his approval anymore. I was a liability he had to manage. "Fine," Julian said. "You made your point. You are smart. You caught us. Congratulations. Can we move on?" "Move on to what?" I asked. "Why are you here, Julian? And do not tell me you miss me. We established that is a lie." Julian looked at our parents, then back at me. He decided to pivot to the truth, or at least a version of it that served his interests. "It is Grandpa Arthur," Julian said. The name hit me harder than I expected. My grandfather. The only person in the Sinclair dynasty who had ever looked at me and seen a person, not an asset. He was the one who taught me to read maps. He was the one who paid for my piano lessons when my parents said it was a waste of time. He was the founder of the empire, but he was also a man who liked gardening and bad puns. "What about him?" I asked, my grip on the door handle tightening. "Is he sick?" "He is turning 80 on Saturday," Julian said. "We are throwing a gala at the estate in Lake Geneva. A jubilee. Everyone will be there. The governor, the board, the investors." "Send him my regards," I said, starting to close the door. "I will mail a card." Julian shot his foot out, wedging his polished Oxford shoe between the door and the frame. It was an aggressive move, one that made my heart race, but I did not flinch. "He is changing his will." "Colette," Julian said, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. I paused. "What?" "He called his lawyers last week," Julian continued, speaking fast now, trying to hook me. "He is rewriting the estate plan. He has been acting strange lately, talking about legacy and integrity. He told Dad that if the family is not whole, if everyone is not present and accounted for at his birthday, he is going to liquidate the assets." "Let him," I said. "I do not want the money." "You might not," Julian sneered, But he is talking about donating the entire estate to the immense preservation trust. Everything. The houses, the company shares, the offshore accounts, $500 million. Colette, gone. Poof. Handed over to save some wetlands and historic barns. I stared at him. Good for him. Do not be an idiot, Julian hissed. If he does that, the company collapses. We are leveraged to the hilt. We need his personal assets to back the loans for the merger. If he gives it away, we are bankrupt. Mom and Dad lose the house. I lose the firm. And you? He looked me up and down, taking in my simple clothes, my small apartment. You lose whatever inheritance you thought you were entitled to. I never thought I was entitled to anything, I said. I worked for everything I have, unlike you. We need you there, Julian said, ignoring my jab. He keeps asking for you. He says he will not sign the final trust documents until he sees his little Colette. If you show up, smile, and play the part of the dutiful granddaughter for 4 hours, he will sign the papers, the company is saved, the inheritance is secured, and we will leave you alone. We will even pay off that loan. The loan you fraudulently took out in my name, I asked sweetly. Call it a settlement, Julian said. $50,000, cash, plus we pay off the loan, just for one evening of work. Come on, Colette, it is the easiest money you will ever make. I looked at him with profound disgust. He really thought everyone had a price. He thought that $50,000 could buy back the year of hell he had put me through. He thought he could buy my dignity. I pushed on the door, trying to force his foot out. Get your foot out of my door. Julian, I am not going. He is dying. Colette, the scream came from my mother. She had stepped forward again, her face pale, her hands clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. This time, there was no Visine. There was just raw, terrified panic. What? I stopped pushing the door. He has congestive heart failure, my mother said, her voice cracking. Stage 4. The doctors say his heart is functioning at 15%. He fainted last week in the garden. He does not have years left. He might not even have months. This birthday, it is not just a party. It is a goodbye. I looked at my father. He nodded solemnly. And for once, he was not looking at a script. He looked old, tired. He refuses to go to the hospital, my father said softly. He wants to die at the estate. All he talks about is you. He keeps asking why you haven't visited. We told him you were in Europe, studying art history. We didn't want to upset him with the truth about the feud. You lied to him, I said. You let him think I abandoned him for a vacation. We were protecting him, my mother sobbed. And protecting you. If he knew you left because of the money issues, it would break his heart. Because of the theft, I corrected her. Say the word. Mother. Theft. She flinched, but didn't deny it. Please, Colette, hate us all you want. We deserve it. But don't punish Grandpa Arthur for our mistakes. He loves you. He really does. If you don't come on Saturday, you might never see him again. I felt the resolve in my chest begin to fracture. Not because of their pleading, I knew they were only begging because their financial survival depended on it, but because of the image of an old man sitting in a garden, wondering why his favorite granddaughter hadn't called in a year. Arthur Sinclair was the only innocent person in this equation. If I stayed away to punish Julian, I would be punishing Arthur too, and I would be denying myself the chance to say goodbye. I looked at Julian. He was watching me with a predator's focus, waiting for the weakness, waiting for the capitulation. Fine, I said. The relief that washed over them was palpable. My mother let out a breathy, thank God. Julian smirked, a triumphant twitch of his lips that he couldn't suppress. Excellent, Julian said, pulling a sleek black envelope from his inside pocket. Here is the invitation. It starts at 6. We will send a car for you at... No, I cut him off. Julian paused, the envelope hovering in midair. Excuse me. I am not riding in a car with you, I said. I am not letting you control my transportation. I will drive myself. But it is a 2-hour drive to Lake Geneva, my mother protested. And your car? Surely it is not reliable. My car is fine, I said. And here are the conditions. Listen closely, because I am only saying this once. I stepped out onto the landing. Forcing them to back up a step, I needed them to understand the power dynamic had shifted. 1, I said, holding up a finger. I am going for Grandpa Arthur. Not for you, not for the company, not for the inheritance. Understood, Julian said, though his eyes said whatever you say. Just show up. 2, I continued. I am not lying to him. If he asks me a direct question, I will answer it. I will not cover for your embezzlement. Julian, I will not tell him I was in Europe. I will tell him I was working. You can't tell him about the money, my father interjected, panic rising in his voice. It would kill him, literally. The stress. Then you better hope he doesn't ask, I said coldly. But I am done lying for this family. 3, I said, holding up a third finger. If I see one moment of disrespect, if you try to silence me, or sideline me, or treat me like the help I leave, immediately, I will walk out in the middle of his toast if I have to. Do we have a deal? The 3 of them exchanged looks. They were trapped. They needed me there to present the tableau of a united family, and they knew I was the only piece missing from the puzzle. They had no choice but to agree to my terms, trusting that they could manage me once I was inside the gates of the estate. We have a deal, Julian said. He handed me the envelope. Saturday, 6 o'clock. Don't be late. I am never late, I said. Goodbye. I stepped back into my apartment and slammed the door in their faces. I threw the deadbolt, then the second lock, then the chain. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, listening to their footsteps retreating down the hall. Unbelievable, I heard Julian mutter as they reached the stairs. She is even more difficult than she used to be. Just get her there, my father's voice drifted back. Once she signs the witness papers, it doesn't matter what she thinks. I waited until the silence returned to the hallway. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a cold, sharp anger. They thought they had won. They thought they had manipulated me back into the fold. I walked to my laptop and woke the screen. The video file was there, safe and sound. I was going to Lake Geneva, but I wasn't going as a prop. I was going as a witness, and if Julian thought he could use me to rob a dying man, he was about to learn that the little sister he bullied had grown up to be a very dangerous woman. Sleep was a luxury I could not afford. The digital clock on my bedside table read 2:47 in the morning, but my mind was running marathons, fueled by adrenaline and the lingering taste of Pinot Noir. The apartment was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Yet the noise in my head was deafening. I sat at my kitchen island, my laptop glowing in the darkness. I had played the Ring camera footage 40 or 50 times by now. I wasn't watching it for the emotional impact anymore. The shock of seeing my parents perform like B-list actors had faded into cold, hard data. Now, I was watching it as an archivist. I was looking for the anomalies. I was looking for the things that didn't belong. Julian Sinclair never did anything without a profit margin attached to it. The idea that he would drive 2 hours to Chicago, stand in a smelly hallway, and beg for my presence simply to comfort a dying grandfather was statistically impossible. Julian did not do comfort. He did leverage. There had to be a trigger. I scrubbed the video timeline back to the 8-minute mark. This was when my parents were arguing about the Vizine. Julian had stepped back, away from the camera's direct line of sight, and pulled out his phone. He had checked it for exactly 6 seconds before shoving it back into his pocket. I paused the video. I zoomed in. The resolution of the Ring camera was good, 1080p, but it wasn't forensic quality. When I enlarged the image, Julian's phone screen was just a wash of white light. "Come on," I whispered, tapping the keyboard. "Give me something." I applied a contrast filter, darkening the blacks and sharpening the edges. It didn't help read the text on the screen, but then I noticed something else. The angle of the camera was positioned above the door, looking down. Julian was standing slightly to the left, near the hallway window. The window had a safety glass pane, reflective against the dark night outside. I shifted my focus from the phone itself to the reflection in the glass. It was faint, a ghostly mirror image distorted by the double glazing. But there was a shape, a distinct, aggressive logo in red and black. It looked like a jagged V cutting through a circle. I took a screenshot and opened a separate browser window. I didn't need to search far. In the world of high-stakes real estate and corporate acquisitions, logos were like flags on a battlefield. I typed in Chicago investment firm's red V logo. The first result made my blood run cold. Vanguard Holdings. I sat back in my chair. Vanguard Holdings was not a bank. It was not a friendly neighborhood lender. It was a private equity firm with a reputation that bordered on criminal. They were corporate raiders. They specialized in distressed assets. Their business model was simple: buy a failing company for pennies on the dollar. Strip it of its valuable assets, real estate, patents, equipment, and then liquidate the rest, leaving the employees and the pensioners with nothing. They were the vultures that circled when the carcass was already rotting. Why was my brother, the CEO of a thriving family empire, receiving notifications from Vanguard Holdings at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night? I needed confirmation. I needed numbers. I picked up my phone. It was nearly 3 in the morning, but I knew exactly who would be awake. Marcus Chen was an old friend from college, a forensic accountant who lived on caffeine and the thrill of hunting hidden assets. He owed me a favor from the time I helped him decipher a water-damaged ledger for a divorce case he was handling. I dialed. He picked up on the second ring. Colette. His voice was raspy but alert. It is 3 in the morning. Either you are in jail, or you have found something interesting. I need you to run a check for me, Marcus, I said, skipping the pleasantries. Sinclair Holdings, the family firm. Your family firm? Marcus asked, the sound of a keyboard clacking already audible in the background. I thought you were out of the game. You are restoring constitutions and love letters now, right? I am, I said, but the game just showed up on my doorstep. I need to know their liquidity status, and I need to know if there is any chatter about a sale. Give me 5 minutes, Marcus said. Stay on the line. I waited, listening to the rhythmic tapping of his keys. I could imagine him in his loft, surrounded by monitors, diving into the deep web of credit reports and UCC filings. Okay, Marcus said after a tense silence. This is ugly. Colette, how much do you know? I know nothing, I said. I have been no contact for a year. Well, sit down, Marcus said. Sinclair Holdings is a corpse walking. They are leveraged at 400%. They defaulted on the interest payments for the Riverview bonds 3 months ago. The banks have frozen their lines of credit. They are technically insolvent. Insolvent, I repeated. I felt a grim sense of vindication. So the IPO never happened. IPO? Marcus laughed darkly. Colette, they are not going public. They are going under. But here's the interesting part. There is a filing from 2 days ago, a letter of intent for a strategic acquisition by a shell corporation managed by, wait for it, Vanguard Holdings, I finished for him. You knew, Marcus accused. I suspected, I said. What are the terms? It is a fire sale, Marcus explained. Vanguard is offering to buy the company out, cover the immediate debts to keep the creditors at bay, and restructure. But Vanguard does not buy debt without security. They want collateral, hard assets. And looking at the Sinclair balance sheet, there is nothing left. The commercial properties are all mortgaged to the hilt. The equipment is leased. The brand value is trash. So what are they buying? I asked. They are not buying the company for the company, Marcus said. They are buying it for the land rights. Specifically, a parcel of lakefront property in Wisconsin that is listed as a potential collateral asset in the negotiation draft. 80 acres on Lake Geneva, prime development territory. My heart stopped. The estate, I whispered. Grandpa Arthur's house. That is the jewel, Marcus confirmed. But there is a snag. I am looking at the corporate bylaws of Sinclair Holdings. It is a closely held family corporation. Any sale of the company, or any transfer of major assets, requires a unanimous vote of the board of directors. The puzzle pieces slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. Who is on the board? Marcus, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Robert Sinclair, Sylvia Sinclair, Julian Sinclair. Marcus read. He paused. And Colette Sinclair. I closed my eyes. They never removed me. They couldn't, Marcus said. Not without a quorum or your resignation letter. And if they forged your resignation, it would void the title insurance on a sale this big. Vanguard does due diligence. They would check. Julian needs your actual signature. Colette, he cannot forge this one. If he sells the company without your sign-off, the deal is void and he goes to prison for fraud. Again. And the land, I said, thinking faster now. The estate isn't owned by the company. It is owned by Arthur personally. Correct, Marcus said, which means Julian has a two-step problem. Step 1, get Arthur to sign the deed over to the company so it can be used as collateral. Step 2, get you to sign off on the sale to Vanguard. Without those two signatures, the house of cards falls down, and Julian loses everything. He needs a family reunion, I said, my voice cold. He needs Grandpa Arthur happy and compliant, so he will sign the deed as a legacy gift or some nonsense. And he needs me in the room to make it look like we are all a big happy team, so I will sign the corporate resolution. That sounds like a classic Sinclair play. Marcus agreed. Colette, if you go there, do not sign anything. Not a birthday card, not a guest book, nothing. Vanguard is ruthless. If they get their claws into that estate, they will bulldoze that Victorian house and put up condos within 6 months. Thank you, Marcus, I said. You are a lifesaver. Be careful, he warned before hanging up. Desperate men do desperate things. I sat in the silence of my kitchen. The dossier I had mentioned to Julian wasn't just a bluff, but it was incomplete. Now, I had the full picture. Julian wasn't just trying to cover up past crimes. He was actively planning a new one. He was going to trick a dying man out of his home, the home he had built 50 years ago. The home he loved more than anything on earth, just to pay off his own failures, and he expected me to be the accessory. I looked at the clock. 4:15. I opened my secure safe box, a fireproof heavy steel box bolted to the floor of my closet. I took out a flash drive. This drive contained the original evidence from a year ago, the bank statements showing the unauthorized loans, the emails where Julian admitted to the crypto losses, the recording of the board meeting where my father slapped me. I plugged it into my laptop. I created a new folder titled Jubilee. I dragged the Ring camera footage into the folder. I dragged the screenshots of the Vanguard logo into the folder. I dragged the notes from my call with Marcus into the folder. I was building a bomb. And I was going to walk it right into the center of the party, but there was one variable I still needed to check. Julian had said Arthur was dying. He had said Arthur was weak. If Arthur was mentally compromised, if he had dementia, or was heavily medicated, Julian might have already manipulated him into signing a power of attorney. If that was the case, my presence wouldn't matter. I needed eyes on the inside. I picked up my phone again. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't used in a year. Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins was Grandpa Arthur's live-in housekeeper and personal assistant. She had been with him for 30 years. She was a woman of iron spine and zero tolerance for nonsense. She loved Arthur, and she despised my parents' pretentiousness. I typed a text message. I kept it simple, in case Julian was monitoring the household phones. Though Mrs. Higgins usually kept her personal cell on a separate network. Mrs. Higgins, it is Colette. I am coming on Saturday. I need to know the truth. Is he lucid? Is he really sick? Code word. Earl Grey. Earl Grey was our old shorthand. It meant, speak freely, safe to talk. I watched the three dots dance on the screen. It was late, but Mrs. Higgins was an early riser, usually up by 4:30 to start the baking. The reply came 2 minutes later. My dear girl, thank heavens. He is sick, heart is failing. Yes, physically weak, but his mind. Sharp as a tack. He is heartbroken, not senile. They try to keep him confused with medication, but he pretends to swallow the sedatives and spits them out in the napkins. He is waiting for you. He refuses to sign their papers until he sees your face. Come home. Earl Grey. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He was fighting. The old lion was weak, but he was still fighting. He was spitting out pills and holding the line, waiting for backup. I am coming, Grandpa, I whispered. I closed my laptop. The decision was made. I wasn't just going to a birthday party, I was going to a rescue mission. I spent the next hour organizing the files. I made 3 copies of the flash drive. One went into my purse, one went into the hidden pocket of the dress I planned to wear, a red dress, bold and unapologetic, nothing like the pastel submissive colors my mother preferred. The 3rd copy I taped to the underside of my car seat, paranoid maybe, but in the Sinclair family, paranoia was just another word for survival. By the time the sun began to rise over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange, I was ready. I showered, scrubbing the exhaustion from my skin. I dressed in my work clothes, but my mind was already in Lake Geneva. I looked at the Ring camera notification one last time. Motion detected. They had triggered the motion. All right, they had set in motion their own destruction. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. I had a busy 2 days ahead of me. I needed to get my car serviced, buy a very specific gift for my grandfather, and prepare myself to look my brother in the eye and lie with the same proficiency he had displayed his entire life. The dress rehearsal was over. Opening night was Saturday, and I was going to steal the show. The drive to Lake Geneva was a 2-hour exercise in controlled breathing. The closer I got to the Wisconsin border, the tighter my chest felt, as if the air itself was changing from the smoggy, honest pollution of Chicago to the rarefied, suffocating atmosphere of old money. I turned off the highway and onto the private road that led to the Sinclair estate, the tires of my 5-year-old sedan crunching over gravel that was probably raked by hand every morning. The iron gates loomed ahead, 12 feet of twisted black metal topped with gold leaf finials. A security guard I did not recognize checked my name against a list on an iPad. He looked at my car, a sensible, reliable vehicle that had served me well during my year of exile, with a sneer reserved for the help. Then he saw my last name on the screen, blinked, and the gates swung open. The driveway was lined with century-old oaks, their branches creating a tunnel of shadows. At the end of it sat the house. It was a sprawling Victorian mansion, a beast of brick and stone with turrets and wraparound porches, illuminated by floodlights that made it look like a stage set. And tonight, the stage was crowded. The circular driveway was a parking lot for the 1%, Bentleys, Aston Martins, a Rolls-Royce Phantom. My car looked like a stray dog wandering into a pedigree show. I handed my keys to a valet who looked like he was afraid my floor mats might soil his white gloves. "Be careful with the clutch," I told him. "It is sticky in second gear." He nodded stiffly, and I turned to face the house. I took a moment to smooth my dress. My mother had sent me 3 text messages in the last 24 hours, all reminding me that the dress code was spring pastels and that I should wear something soft and feminine to put Grandpa at ease. She wanted me in pale pink or baby blue. She wanted me to blend into the wallpaper. I was wearing red, not a polite burgundy or a cheerful cherry, but a deep, violent crimson. It was a silk sheath dress that fit like a second skin, with a sharp, geometric neckline and a slit that went just high enough to be dangerous. It was the color of a warning sign. It was the color of blood. It was the only armor I had. I walked up the stone steps, the sound of my heels clicking a sharp staccato against the masonry. The front doors were open, spilling golden light and the murmur of polite conversation into the night. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air changed. It was heavy with the scent of lilies, Grandpa's favorite, but to me, they always smelled like a funeral parlor and expensive perfume. The foyer was crowded with people holding crystal flutes of champagne. I recognized some of them local politicians, board members, socialites who had known me since I was a child. They turned to look, their smiles freezing slightly as they registered who I was, and more importantly, what I was wearing. I saw the whispers start, the gentle tilting of heads. Is that Colette? I thought she was in rehab. I thought she was in Europe. My God, look at that dress. Before I could take 3 steps into the room, a hand clamped around my upper arm. The grip was hard, painful, the fingers digging into my bicep with bruising force. "You are late," a voice hissed in my ear. I did not flinch. I turned my head slowly to look at my brother. Julian was wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, his hair styled to a glossy sheen. He was smiling at the room, waving to a couple across the foyer with his free hand, but his eyes, locked on mine, were dead cold. "Hello? Julian," I said, keeping my voice pleasant. "You are hurting me." "I told you 6 o'clock, he whispered through his teeth, increasing the pressure on my arm. "It is 6:40. And what the hell are you wearing? Mom told you pastels. You look like a scarlet woman." "I look like someone who is not afraid of you," I corrected him. "Let go of my arm, or I will scream, right here, in front of the senator over there." Julian's eyes flickered to the senator, then back to me. He released my arm, smoothing the sleeve of his tuxedo as if he had touched something dirty. "Listen to me," he said, stepping into my personal space so that to an observer, it looked like an intimate sibling chat. "There are 2 men in gray suits standing by the bar. They are senior partners from Vanguard Holdings. They are here to assess the family dynamic. If you do anything to make us look unstable, I will ruin you. I will dig up that loan fraud and make sure it sticks to you so hard you will never work in this country again." "The loan fraud you committed?" I asked, smiling brightly at a passing waiter and taking a glass of champagne. "That is a bold strategy, Julian. Just smile," he commanded, "and for God's sake, cover that slit in your dress." My mother appeared from the crowd like a specter in beige chiffon. She looked brittle, her smile tight and anxious. She scanned my dress with a look of pure horror, but she recovered quickly, rushing forward to kiss the air beside my cheek. "Colette, darling," she exclaimed, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. Then, dropping her voice to a venomous whisper as she pulled back, "You did this on purpose. You are trying to give your father a stroke." "Dad looks fine," I said, glancing at Robert Sinclair, who was laughing too loudly at a joke made by one of the Vanguard men. "He looks like he is celebrating." "Don't mention the money," my mother hissed, gripping my other arm. "Don't mention the company, and do not mention the debt. Grandpa is frail. Colette, his heart is ticking on borrowed time. If you upset him, if you cause a scene that stresses him out, his blood is on your hands. You are weaponizing his heart failure." "Mother," I said, pulling my arm away. "That is a new low, even for you." "I am protecting him," she insisted, her eyes darting around the room to ensure our facade was holding. "Now come, he is in the main ballroom. He has been asking for you every 10 minutes. They flanked me, marching me through the house like a prisoner transfer. We passed through the library, the drawing room, the long hallway lined with portraits of Sinclair ancestors who looked down with judgmental stares. Near the entrance to the ballroom, I saw a woman standing alone by a potted fern. She was staring into her drink, her shoulders hunched. It took me a moment to recognize her. "Alyssa," I said, stopping. Julian's wife looked up. She was 28, a former beauty queen who used to light up a room. Now, she looked like a ghost. Her skin was sallow, her collarbones jutting out sharply against her pale blue dress. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "Colette," she whispered. Her eyes widened, and for a second, I saw a flash of something raw hope. Maybe, or terror. She took a step toward me. "You came. I didn't think you would come." "I am here," I said, stepping toward her. Alyssa, are you okay? You look. She is fine, Julian interrupted. Stepping between us, he placed a hand on the small of Alyssa's back. It looked possessive, controlling. Alyssa flinched, a microscopic movement, but I saw it. She has been under the weather, a migraine, right, honey. Alyssa looked at Julian, then at me. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked terrified. Yes, she murmured, looking down at her shoes. Just a migraine. She looked at me again, and her eyes darted toward the ladies' powder room down the hall, then back to me. It was a signal, a desperate, silent plea. We need to get to Grandpa, Julian said, steering me away. Come on. I looked back at Alyssa as we walked away. She was watching me, her hand gripping her champagne flute so hard I thought the stem would snap. We entered the ballroom. It was a sea of tuxedos and gowns, centered around a small dais where an armchair had been set up. Sitting in the chair was Arthur Sinclair. He looked smaller than I remembered. The grandfather who used to hoist me onto his shoulders was now a fragile collection of bones wrapped in a velvet smoking jacket. His skin was translucent like parchment, his hands trembling slightly as they rested on his knees. An oxygen tank sat discreetly behind his chair, a clear tube running to his nose. But when he saw me, the years seemed to fall away. Colette. His voice was thin, reedy, but it carried the warmth of 1,000 suns. He tried to stand up, his legs shaking. I rushed forward, ignoring Julian and my mother, dropping to my knees beside his chair so I didn't have to look down at him. I took his hands. They were cold, but his grip was surprisingly strong. Grandpa, I said, feeling a lump form in my throat that had nothing to do with acting. Happy birthday. He cupped my face with his hand. His eyes, a sharp, piercing blue, searched mine. You are here. My girl is here. Look at you. You look fiery, like a warrior. He chuckled, a wheezing sound. Your grandmother used to wear red when she was angry with me. I am not angry, Grandpa. I lied softly. I just wanted to look nice for you. Where have you been? He asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. A year. Colette, not a letter, not a call. Mrs. Higgins said you were busy, but... She was in Europe, Grandpa, Julian said loudly, looming over my shoulder. Remember we told you, she was studying Baroque architecture in Vienna. The reception was terrible. She was in the mountains. I stiffened. Vienna. The mountains. It was such a lazy, cliché lie. Grandpa Arthur looked at me, confusion clouding his eyes. Vienna. You never liked the Baroque style. You always said it was too ornamental. You liked the clean lines of the mid-century. He was sharp, even dying. He knew me better than my own brother did. I felt Julian's hand on my shoulder, a heavy weight warning me to play along. I learned to appreciate it. Grandpa, I said, forcing the words out. People change. Interests change. And you couldn't send a postcard? Arthur asked, a hurt look crossing his face. From Vienna. I was working on a special project, I said, choosing my words carefully. It required total isolation. I couldn't contact anyone. It was sensitive. Sensitive, Arthur repeated, studying my face. He didn't buy it. I could see the gears turning in his head. He looked from me to Julian, then to my mother, who was hovering with a frozen smile. Well, you are back now, Arthur said firmly. That is what matters, and you are staying for good. We are discussing it, Julian interjected smoothly. Colette has some loose ends to tie up in Europe, but she is here for the party. She is here for you. I want to talk to her, Arthur said, swatting at Julian's hand. Alone. Everyone back off. Give an old man a moment with his granddaughter. Panic flared in Julian's eyes. Grandpa, the guests are waiting for the toast. The timeline is tight, and the doctor said you shouldn't get too excited. I am 80 years old. Julian, Arthur snapped, showing a flash of his old fire. I will get as excited as I damn well please. Go get me a scotch. Neat. Water, my mother corrected. You can have water, Dad. Scotch, Arthur roared. I will get it, Julian said. But he didn't move to the bar. He moved to the side, signaling someone with his eyes. I followed his gaze. Standing in the shadows near a marble pillar was a man I didn't recognize. He was holding a thick, leather-bound folder. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't socializing. He was watching us like a hawk. It was the lawyer. Julian walked over to him, and I watched through the reflection in a nearby mirror. Julian whispered something urgent, pointing at his watch, then at Grandpa. The lawyer nodded and tapped the folder. I saw the edge of a document peeking out. It had a blue cover sheet, the standard color for property deeds in Wisconsin. Colette. Grandpa Arthur tugged on my hand, pulling my attention back. He leaned in close, his voice barely a breath. Why are you wearing red? I looked at him. You said Grandma wore it when she was angry. He nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. And who are you angry at, Grandpa? I whispered, glancing back to make sure Julian was out of earshot. I need to tell you something, but not here. I know, he whispered back. I know they are lying. Vienna Ba. You hate schnitzel. I almost laughed, but tears pricked my eyes instead. I do hate schnitzel. They want something, Arthur murmured. Julian has been hovering over me like a vulture for weeks. Papers, always papers. Sign this, Grandpa. Sign that, Grandpa. I haven't signed a damn thing. Good, I said fiercely. Don't. Do not sign anything tonight, no matter what they say. I won't, Arthur promised. Not until I know the truth. You are going to tell me the truth. Colette, tonight, in my study, after the cake. I will, I promised. Well, this is touching. Julian's voice boomed as he returned, holding a glass of amber liquid that I suspected was apple juice, not scotch. But we have a schedule to keep. Colette, why don't you mingle? The partners from Vanguard are dying to meet the mysterious sister. He practically hauled me to my feet. I will be back, I told Arthur. I am not going anywhere, Arthur said, glaring at Julian. Julian steered me away from the dais, his grip on my elbow returning. You are doing okay, he muttered. But cut the whispering. It looks conspiratorial. It is a conspiracy. Julian, I said. Yours? Just go talk to the Vanguard guys, he ordered. Tell them you love the company. Tell them you are excited about the restructuring. Do not mention the words bankruptcy or embezzlement. Got it? Or what? I asked. Or Alyssa might have a very bad accident, he said. I stopped dead. What did you say? Julian smiled, a chilling, dead-eyed expression. She is fragile. Colette, you saw her. Depressed people. They are so clumsy. They fall downstairs. They mix pills with alcohol. It would be a tragedy. I stared at him, my blood turning to ice. He wasn't just a thief anymore. He was a monster. He was threatening his own wife to keep me in line. You are sick, I whispered. I am a businessman, Julian corrected. Now go mingle. He gave me a shove toward the bar. I stumbled slightly, catching my balance. I looked back. Julian was already walking back toward the lawyer, reaching for the folder. I needed to move fast. I needed the evidence Alyssa had. And I needed to get it before Julian forced Arthur to sign that deed. I scanned the room. Alyssa was gone from the fern. I looked toward the hallway. The door to the ladies' powder room was just closing. I set my champagne glass down on a passing waiter's tray. I smoothed my red dress. Time to go to the bathroom, I whispered to myself. The powder room on the ground floor of the Sinclair estate was designed to make you feel small. It was a cavern of black marble and gold fixtures, lit by crystal sconces that cast an unforgiving light on every flaw. The mirrors were floor to ceiling, reflecting the person you were pretending to be back at you from a dozen different angles. I locked the door behind me and leaned against the cold wood, letting out a breath that shook in my chest. The noise of the party, the clinking of crystal, the polite laughter. The drone of a string quartet playing Mozart was muffled, but I could still feel the vibration of it in the floorboards. It felt like the house itself was humming with tension. I walked to the sink and turned on the tap. The water came out cold, and I splashed it on my wrists, trying to lower my heart rate. I looked at myself in the mirror. The red dress was a statement. Yes. But standing there in the harsh light, I looked like a wound in the side of the room. My lipstick was perfect. My hair was sleek. But my eyes looked haunted. I needed 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to recalibrate before I had to go back out there and navigate the minefield Julian had laid for me. Then, the doorknob turned. It jiggled violently. Once, twice, then a soft, frantic knocking. "Colette, are you in there?" It was Alyssa. Her voice was a high-pitched whisper, barely audible through the solid oak. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to claim this sanctuary for a few more moments, but I remembered the look in her eyes near the fern, the raw, unadulterated terror. I unlocked the door. Alyssa slipped inside like a shadow. She didn't just walk in, she practically fell into the room, turning immediately to throw the deadbolt back into place. Her hands were shaking so badly she missed the latch on the first try. "Alyssa." I stepped back, watching her. "What is going on?" She turned to face me. The composure she had maintained in the hallway was gone. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and bloodshot. She looked like a woman who had been holding her breath for a year and was finally, desperately, gasping for air. "You have to leave," she whispered, grabbing my hands. Her palms were clammy. "You have to get in your car and drive away right now. Don't say goodbye. Don't talk to Arthur. Just go." "I can't go," I said, pulling my hands away gently. "I came for Grandpa, and I am not leaving until I stop Julian from selling the estate." "Selling the estate!" Alyssa let out a hysterical, choked laugh. She pressed a hand to her forehead, pacing the small stretch of marble floor. "Oh, God, you think that is it? You think he just wants to sell the house?" I frowned. "He is selling the company to Vanguard. He needs the house as collateral. That is the plan, right?" Alyssa stopped pacing. She looked at me, and the pity in her eyes made my stomach turn over. "Colette," she said, her voice dropping so low I had to lean in to hear her. "There is no company to sell. Not really. Sinclair Holdings is a shell. The assets are gone. But that is not why Vanguard is hesitant. Vanguard found the hole in the pension fund. The room seemed to tilt. The pension fund. The Employee Retirement Trust," Alyssa said, tears finally spilling over her lashes. "The money for the groundskeepers, the archivists, the secretaries who have worked here for 30 years, $3 million. I stared at her. "What about it?" "It is gone," she whispered. "Julian drained it. I felt the blood drain from my face. Embezzlement from a corporate account was one thing, it was a white-collar crime. Nasty but often settled with fines and lawsuits. But stealing a pension fund, stealing the life savings of working-class people, that was federal. That was prison time. That was the kind of crime that got you put on the evening news in handcuffs." "He used it to cover his margin calls on the crypto losses," Alyssa continued, the words tumbling out of her like a confession. "He thought he could make it back before anyone noticed. But the market crashed, and the hole just got bigger. $3 million. Colette, he stole it all." "He is going to jail," I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "If Vanguard does due diligence—" "That is why you are here," Alyssa cut me off. She grabbed my shoulders, her grip surprisingly strong. "Don't you see? He doesn't just need your vote to sell the company. He needs a scapegoat." I shook my head, trying to process the insanity of it. "What are you talking about?" "I heard him on the phone with his lawyer last night," Alyssa said, her eyes darting to the door as if she expected Julian to burst through the wood. "He has been keeping your access codes active for the last 12 months. He backdated the transfers. He created a digital paper trail that makes it look like the withdrawals from the pension fund were authorized by your user profile, by you. I felt like I was going to be sick. The room started to spin. He framed me. He is going to ask you to sign a document tonight, Alyssa said. He will tell you it is a shareholder confirmation or a family unity agreement or some other nonsense title. He will say it is just a formality to approve the Vanguard deal so he can pay off your loan. But it is not. She took a shaky breath. It is an admission of liability. Buried in the fine print, in the legal jargon on page 40, is a clause where you accept retroactive responsibility for all financial transfers made under your profile in the last fiscal year. If you sign that paper, you are confessing to stealing $3 million. I backed up until my legs hit the marble vanity. I gripped the edge of the sink to keep from sliding to the floor. He wants to send me to prison, I whispered. His own sister. He thinks he can spin it, Alyssa said rapidly. He will tell the police you were disgruntled because of the family feud, that you stole the money to get revenge for being cut off. He gets to be the grieving brother who was betrayed by his greedy sister. Vanguard gets the company clean of liability because the criminal has been caught, and Julian walks away with the payout. It was monstrous. It was evil in a way that I hadn't thought Julian was capable of. I knew he was selfish. I knew he was greedy. But this was sociopathic. And Grandpa? I asked, my voice trembling. What about Grandpa? Alyssa wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing her expensive mascara. The birthday gift. The folder the lawyer is holding. It is a durable power of attorney. Julian is going to present it as a charitable trust for the wetlands, something Arthur has always wanted to set up. But the language gives Julian full control over Arthur's personal assets immediately. The moment Arthur signs that, Julian will seize the deed to the estate, evict the old man, and hand the property over to Vanguard to close the deal. He is going to steal his home, I said, fury beginning to replace the shock. He is going to kick a dying man out of his own house. He is desperate, Alyssa said. He owes money to people who don't file lawsuits. Colette, dangerous people. If this deal doesn't close by Monday, he is a dead man, and he is willing to kill all of us to save himself. She reached into the bodice of her dress and pulled out a small, silver object. It was a USB drive, warm from her skin. Take it, she said, thrusting it into my hand. What is this? I asked, closing my fingers around the cold metal. It is everything, Alyssa said. I copied his hard drive while he was sleeping 2 nights ago, the real ledgers, the emails with the offshore accounts, the chat logs where he discusses framing you. It proves everything. It proves he did it, not you. I looked at the small drive. It weighed nothing, yet it held the weight of an entire empire. Why are you doing this? I asked, looking at her. You are his wife. If he goes down, you lose everything, too. Alyssa looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the woman she used to be before Julian broke her. I have a daughter, she said softly. From my first marriage. She is 6, Julian. He threatened to involve her. He said if I didn't play along, he would make sure her father lost custody. He said he would ruin her life like he ruined yours. She stepped closer, her voice fierce. I can be poor. Colette, I can be homeless, but I cannot be the wife of a monster. I cannot let him hurt Arthur, and I cannot let him send you to prison for his crimes. I am done. The sound of heavy footsteps approached the door. Thud, thud, thud. Then, a fist pounded on the wood. It wasn't the polite knock of a guest. It was the aggressive, demanding hammer of a man who owned the building. Alyssa. Julian's voice came through the door. It was low, controlled, but terrifying. Are you in there? Alyssa froze. The color drained from her face completely. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. Answer him, I whispered. Act normal. Alyssa. Julian banged again. Harder this time. The door rattled in its frame. Open the door. Now. I am in here. Julian. Alyssa called out, her voice cracking. I am just fixing my makeup. Is Colette with you? He demanded. I looked at Alyssa. She nodded frantically. Yes, I said, making my voice loud and annoyed. I am here. Julian, can a girl pee in peace without you hovering? There was a pause on the other side of the door. I could hear him breathing. Or maybe I was imagining it. You have been in there for 10 minutes, Julian said. The toast is starting. Get out here, both of you. We are coming, I yelled back. I turned to Alyssa. You need to pull yourself together. If he sees you like this, he will know. I grabbed a tissue and wetted it, handing it to her. Wipe your eyes. Fix your face. Alyssa scrubbed at her cheeks, her hands trembling. She pulled a compact from her purse and aggressively powdered her nose, hiding the redness. I took the USB drive. I couldn't put it in my purse, Julian might search it. I couldn't hold it in my hand. I reached into the neckline of my red dress and slipped the drive into the cup of my bra. Right against my heart. It was cold and hard, a constant reminder of the weapon I was carrying. I turned back to the mirror. I took out my lipstick, a shade called Victory Red, and applied a fresh coat. My hand was steady, rock steady. I wasn't afraid anymore. The fear had burned away, leaving only a cold, crystalline clarity. Julian wasn't just a bad brother. He was a predator, and predators didn't stop until they were put down. Ready? I asked Alyssa. She took a deep breath, smoothing her blue dress. She looked fragile, but she nodded. Ready? I walked to the door and unlocked it. I opened it slowly. Julian was standing right there, filling the frame. He looked from Alyssa to me, his eyes narrowing. He was looking for signs of conspiracy. He was looking for the whisper of treason. What were you talking about? He asked, his gaze flicking to Alyssa's red-rimmed eyes. Girl stuff, I said, breezing past him. Menopause, hormones, you wouldn't understand. I stopped and looked back at him. I gave him a smile that was all teeth, the kind of smile a shark gives before it bites. You look stressed, Julian, I said lightly. You should relax. It is a party. What could possibly go wrong? Julian stared at me, a flicker of unease passing through his eyes. He sensed the change in me. He sensed that the prey had suddenly decided to stop running. Just get to the ballroom, he growled. Grandpa is waiting. Oh, I know, I said, touching the hidden drive beneath my dress. I can't wait to see him. I turned and walked down the hallway, my heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. I was walking into the lion's den. Yes, but the lion didn't know I had brought a grenade. The dining room of the Sinclair estate was designed to intimidate. It was a cavernous space paneled in dark mahogany, illuminated by a chandelier that dripped with enough crystal to feed a small family for a year. The table, a 20-foot slab of polished oak, was set for 30 guests, with silverware aligned with military precision and centerpieces of white roses that stood like sentries between the plates. I was marched to my seat like a convict on death row being escorted to the electric chair. My placement was strategic, calculated to the millimeter. I was seated on the right side of the table, exactly halfway down. To my left sat my father, Robert. To my right sat my mother, Sylvia. I was physically bracketed, pinned between them so that I could not move, speak, or breathe without one of them knowing about it. Across from me sat the two men from Vanguard Holdings. They looked like twins separated at birth, wearing identical gray suits, identical expensive watches, and identical expressions of bored calculation. They were not eating, they were watching. So, Colette, the one on the left said, slicing his filet mignon with surgical precision. Julian tells us you have been in Vienna. Fascinating city. Did you visit the Belvedere? My father's hand clamped onto my knee under the table. His grip was iron hard, a silent warning, stick to the script. It was a working sabbatical, I said, picking up my water glass. I noticed my wine glass had been filled to the brim with a heavy Cabernet. But I didn't touch it. I needed a clear head. I spent most of my time in the archives. I did not get out much. Dedication, The Vanguard man nodded approvingly. We like dedication. It runs in the family. It seems Julian has been telling us about the restructuring plans. Very ambitious. Julian has always been ambitious, I said, keeping my voice neutral. To the Sinclairs, a voice rang out from the end of the table. It was Senator Miller, raising his glass high. His face was flushed with wine and goodwill. A true American dynasty, in a world where families fall apart. You people are a beacon of unity, 3 generations strong. Here, the guests chorused. My mother smiled, dabbing at her dry eyes with a linen napkin. You are too kind. Senator, we are just blessed. That is all. I felt bile rise in my throat. I looked down at my plate. The food roasted duck with a cherry reduction looked like roadkill. Under the table, my mother's heel dug into my ankle. I looked up and forced a smile that felt like I was baring my teeth. The dinner was an exercise in endurance. I listened to people praise my father for his business acumen, unaware that he had run the company into insolvency. I listened to them compliment my mother on her charity work, unaware she was complicit in stealing a pension fund. It was a carnival of lies, and I was the clown sitting in the center of the ring. Grandpa Arthur sat at the head of the table. He was barely eating. He looked tired, his energy fading as the night wore on. Every few minutes, his eyes would drift to me, questioning, waiting. I touched the hard shape of the USB drive hidden inside my dress. Hold on, Grandpa. I thought, just a little longer. As the waiters cleared the main course and poured champagne for the toast, Julian stood up. He tapped a spoon against his glass. Ting, ting, ting. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the golden boy. He looked magnificent in the candlelight, the very picture of the grieving, loving, responsible grandson. Thank you all for coming, Julian began, his voice rich and trembling with practiced emotion. 80 years, that is a milestone that few achieve with such grace. My grandfather, Arthur Sinclair, built this house, this company, this family, with his bare hands. He paused, looking down at Arthur with a gaze that seemed filled with adoration. He taught me that a man is nothing without his legacy. Julian continued. He taught me that when the storm comes, the family stands together, like oaks in the wind. We do not break, we endure. There were murmurs of agreement around the table. My father nodded solemnly, looking like a statesman. And tonight, Julian said, turning his eyes toward me. The warmth in his gaze was terrifying because I knew it was hollow. Tonight, the circle is finally complete. My sister, Colette, has returned to us from Europe. He gestured to me. The room applauded. I sat frozen, my hands clenched in my lap. I know we have had our differences, Julian said, smiling at the guests as if sharing a charming family secret. Siblings always do. But when I called her and told her that Grandpa needed her, she dropped everything. She flew back to be here, because she knows, just like I do, that being a Sinclair means showing up. He raised his glass. To Arthur, to family, to the future. To the future, the guests echoed. Drinking deep, I did not drink. I stared at Julian. The future he was toasting to was a prison cell for me and a nursing home for Arthur. And now, Julian said, setting his glass down, in honor of this night, I have a special presentation, a gift. He snapped his fingers. The lawyer, the man I had seen lurking in the shadows earlier, stepped forward from the corner of the room. He was carrying the leather folder. Julian walked over to Arthur. He knelt down beside the wheelchair, placing the folder on the table in front of the old man. Grandpa, Julian said softly, his voice carrying clearly in the silent room. I know you have been worried about the estate. You have been worried about what happens to the wetlands and the house when, well, in the future. Arthur looked at the folder, his hands trembling. Julian, I want it preserved. And it will be, Julian promised. That is my gift to you. We have drawn up the papers to create the Arthur Sinclair Legacy Trust. This document transfers the title of the estate into a protected trust that will ensure the land is never developed, never sold, and stays in the family name forever. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a lie, a bold-faced, blackened lie. The document wasn't a preservation trust. It was a transfer of deed to the company, which would then be used as collateral for Vanguard. Once the ink was dry, Vanguard would own the land, and they would pave over the rose garden within a month. "You did this for me?" Arthur asked, tears welling in his eyes. "You protected the house." "I did," Julian said. "All you have to do is sign, and the house is safe forever." The lawyer uncapped a heavy fountain pen and held it out to Arthur. "And there is one more thing," Julian added. Standing up and turning to me, he pulled a second document from the back of the folder. It was a single sheet of paper, dense with text. He walked over to where I was sitting. He placed the paper in front of me, right on top of my charger plate. "Colette," Julian said, his voice loud enough for the Vanguard partners to hear. "Since you are back, and since you are technically still a board member, we need you to witness the creation of the trust. And this," he tapped the paper, "this is just the reinstatement of your voting rights, a formality to show the board that we are united again. A welcome home contract, if you will." I looked down at the paper. The header read, "Shareholder Ratification and Indemnity Agreement." My eyes scanned the text rapidly. I had spent years reading dense archival contracts. I knew how to find the trapdoors. And there it was, buried in paragraph 4. Section B. The undersigned director hereby ratifies and accepts full personal liability for all financial transactions, transfers, and withdrawals authorized under their digital credentials during the fiscal period of 2024 to 2025, including but not limited to the pension disbursement of $3,200,000. Alyssa was right. It wasn't a welcome home. It was a confession. If I signed this, I was admitting that I authorized the theft of the pension fund. I would be signing my own arrest warrant. "Go ahead, Colette," my father whispered, leaning in close. His breath smelled of stale wine. "Sign it. Don't make a scene." "It is just a formality," my mother hissed in my other ear, her hand squeezing my thigh so hard it hurt. "Do it for Grandpa. Look at him. He is waiting." I looked up. Grandpa Arthur was holding the pen, hovering over his document. He was looking at me, his eyes full of trust. He was waiting for me to sign mine so we could do it together, a shared moment of family unity. "Sign it, Colette," Julian said, smiling beatifically. "Show Grandpa you are with us." The Vanguard partners were watching. The senator was watching. The whole room was holding its breath, waiting for the prodigal daughter to complete the picture. I reached out and took the pen Julian offered me. It was heavy, expensive. I looked at Julian. His eyes were triumphant. He thought he had me. He thought the pressure of the room, the guilt of the dying grandfather, and the physical threat of our parents would force my hand. He thought I was still the little sister who just wanted to be loved. I looked at the document. I looked at the line where my name was typed, Colette Sinclair, Director. I looked at Arthur. "Grandpa," I said clearly. "Yes, my dear," Arthur said, smiling weakly. "I love you," I said. Then, I looked at Julian. I let my smile drop. I let the mask shatter. I placed the pen on the table. Click. The sound was small, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like a gunshot. "I cannot sign this," I said. The air left the room. "What?" Julian's smile faltered. "Colette, don't be silly. It is just a witness signature." "No," I said, my voice rising, steady and cold. "It is not. This is not a reinstatement form. Julian, this is an admission of guilt for the $3 million you stole from the employee pension fund." Gasps rippled through the room. A wine glass shattered somewhere in the back. "And Grandpa," I said, turning to the old man who sat frozen with the pen in his hand, "that is not a preservation trust. That is a deed transfer. If you sign that..." Julian is going to hand this house over to Vanguard Holdings tomorrow morning to pay off his gambling debts. He is going to evict you. Colette, my father roared, slamming his hand on the table. Shut your mouth. You are drunk, my mother shrieked, jumping up and grabbing my shoulder. She is drunk. She has been drinking all night. I haven't had a drop, I said, shrugging her hand off with a violent jerk. I stood up, pushing my chair back. It scraped loudly against the parquet floor. I am not drunk, I said, looking at the stunned guests, at the Vanguard partners who were now exchanging alarmed glances. I am the only sober person in this room. I looked at Julian. His face had gone from golden boy to cornered rat in the span of 3 seconds. You wanted a show. Julian, I asked, reaching into the neckline of my red dress. You wanted the family to be together, let's really be together. I pulled out the USB drive. Let's show everyone what the Sinclair legacy really looks like. Colette, sit down. Julian hissed, his voice a low, vibrating growl that was meant only for me, but in the sudden, dead silence of the ballroom, it carried like a shout. Stop this childish tantrum and sign the paper, now! He lunged across the table, his hand reaching for my wrist, his fingers curled into a claw. The mask of the polished executive had completely dissolved. His face was twisted, ugly with desperation. He looked like a man watching his life rafts burn. I took a step back, dodging his grasp with a fluid movement. I stood tall in my red dress, feeling the eyes of every person in the room on me. There was no fear left in my body, only a cold, burning purpose. Childish? I asked, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room, to the waiters frozen with their trays, to the senator with his mouth slightly open. Is it childish to refuse to go to prison for a crime I did not commit? Julian, is it childish to ask why I should sign a confession for the $5 million you embezzled? The number hung in the air like smoke. $5 million. She is lying, Julian shouted, turning to face the guests, his arms spread wide in a gesture of persecuted innocence. She is unstable. She has been off her medication for months. Security. Get her out of here. 2 burly security guards in black suits started to move from the perimeter of the room. They looked uncertain, glancing between Julian and the confused crowd. Stay where you are, I commanded. My voice cracked like a whip. The guards hesitated. If you touch me, I said, looking them in the eye, you will be accessories to a federal crime, because what I am about to show you is evidence, and suppressing evidence is a felony. I pulled my phone from my clutch. I didn't look at Julian. I looked at the massive LED screen set up behind the dais. It had been cycling through a slideshow of sepia-toned photos Grandpa Arthur as a young man. The groundbreaking of the first Sinclair building, happy family picnics that never actually happened. Julian says we are a united family, I said, walking toward the center of the room. He says we are oaks in the wind. He says we love each other. I tapped my screen. I had already paired with the media system hours ago, hacking the Bluetooth connection while I was pretending to use the bathroom. Before we talk about the money, I said, let's see what that love actually looks like. The giant screen flickered. The image of a smiling young Arthur vanished. In its place, a grainy, high-contrast black and white video appeared. The timestamp in the corner read, Thursday, 8:47 p.m. The audio boomed through the high-end sound system, crisp and undeniable. Okay, cut, stop, Mom, you are doing it again. You are wiping your eyes before the tears even fall. It looks fake. The Julian on the screen was pointing a finger at my mother. The Julian in the room went pale, his skin taking on the color of old ash. I cannot help it. Julian, the hallway smells like boiled cabbage. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd, quickly stifled by shock. Focus, Sylvia, we have one shot at this. If she smells even an ounce of bullshit, she slams the door, and we are done. My mother, Sylvia, who had been standing by the table looking like a tragic victim, let out a strangled sound. She swayed on her feet, her hand clutching her chest. "Dad, let's hear the line. We miss you. Colette, please come home. Your grandfather. He needs you." Jesus Christ, Dad, you are reading a grocery list. Put some emotion into it. We miss you. The emphasis is on miss. And look at the camera when you say it. Then look down. Shame. You need to project shame. The video played on. 14 minutes of cold, calculated manipulation. The guests watched in stunned silence as the loving family dissected their emotions like biologists dissecting a frog. They watched my father practice his sad face. They watched my mother apply Visine. They watched Julian check his watch and worry about the time. Remember, the goal is to get her to Grandma's birthday. We don't actually have to mean it. We just need her to think we are sorry. The video cut to black. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of an illusion shattering. The Sinclair dynasty, the beacon of unity, lay in shards on the floor. My mother made a soft, keening noise. Her knees buckled. This time, there was no acting. She collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving. My father stood frozen, staring at the floor as if wishing a trapdoor would open and swallow him whole. But Julian was still standing. He was breathing hard, his eyes darting around the room, assessing the damage, looking for an exit, looking for a spin. "It is a deep fake," Julian shouted, pointing a trembling finger at the screen. "She edited it, AI technology. You can do anything with computers these days. It is not real." "It is real," I said calmly. "And the metadata is time-stamped and location verified, but that is just the appetizer." "Julian," I held up the silver USB drive. It glinted under the chandelier lights. "This," I said, "is the main course." I walked over to the laptop connected to the projector. Julian moved to intercept me, but one of the Vanguard partners, a tall man with eyes like flint, stepped in his path. "Let her speak," the Vanguard partner said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a billion-dollar portfolio. Julian stopped. He knew better than to push a man who owned half of Wall Street. I plugged the USB drive into the laptop. "You want to know why Sinclair Holdings is insolvent?" I asked the room. "It is not because of the market. It is not because of interest rates." I opened the first file. A spreadsheet appeared on the massive LED screen, rows and columns of numbers, highlighted in red. "This is the ledger for the Riverview project," I explained, pointing to the screen. $200,000, transferred to a shell company called Apex Ventures. Apex Ventures is a personal trading account owned by Julian Sinclair. I clicked the next file. "And this," I said, my voice hardening, "is the Employee Pension Fund, $3 million, the retirement savings of the people who mow the lawns, who clean the offices, who have given 30 years of their lives to this family." The screen showed a graph, a steep, terrifying nosedive to zero. "Gone," I said. "Every cent, gambled away on cryptocurrency and high-risk shorts, and when the money was gone, Julian didn't stop. He started looking for a fall guy." I opened the final document, the one he had tried to make me sign just moments ago. "This document," I said, "assigns retroactive liability to me. He kept my user profile active for 12 months after I left. He made the transfers look like they came from my desk. He brought me here tonight not to reunite the family, but to pin a felony on me so he could walk away with the insurance payout." I turned to look at the guests. The shock on their faces had turned to disgust. The senator was looking at my father with open contempt. The Vanguard partners were typing furiously on their phones. "He tried to sell you a crime scene," I told the Vanguard men, "and he tried to steal the deed to this house to pay for it." I turned back to Julian. He was shaking. He looked small. The tuxedo didn't make him look powerful anymore. It looked like a costume he had outgrown. "It is over. Julian," I said softly. You bitch," Julian whispered. It was a broken sound. You ruined everything. We could have saved it. We could have all been rich." "No," I said. "You could have been rich. I would have been in prison, and Grandpa would have been homeless." I walked over to Grandpa Arthur. He was still sitting in his wheelchair, the unsigned deed on his lap. He looked at the screen, then at Julian, then at me. He didn't look frail anymore. He looked furious. He picked up the heavy fountain pen. He looked at the deed, the document that would have given everything to Julian. Slowly, deliberately, he tore the paper in half. Then he tore it again, and again, until the Arthur Sinclair Legacy Trust was nothing but confetti on his lap. He threw the pieces at Julian's feet. "Get out," Arthur said. His voice was not a wheeze. It was a command. "Grandpa, wait. I can explain," Julian started, taking a step forward. "I said, get out," Arthur roared, slamming his fist on the arm of his chair. "You are no grandson of mine. You are a thief and a liar." Arthur turned to the security guards. "Escort him off the property and call the police." The guards didn't hesitate this time. They moved in on Julian, grabbing him by the arms. "Don't touch me," Julian screamed, struggling as they dragged him toward the double doors. "I am the CEO. I own this place. Mom, Dad, do something." My parents did nothing. My mother was sobbing into the tablecloth. My father was staring at the wall. A man who had lost his past, his present, and his future in the span of 10 minutes. As they dragged Julian out, he looked back at me. His eyes were wild with hate. "You will regret this. Colette," he screamed. "You have nothing. You are nothing." I stood in the center of the ruined party, the red dress blazing like a beacon. I looked at him, and I felt a strange, quiet peace settle over me. "I have the truth," I said, "and that is enough." The doors slammed shut behind him. The room was silent. Then, slowly, tentatively, the Vanguard partners started to clap. It was a slow, rhythmic applause. Then the senator joined in. Then Alyssa, standing in the back of the room with tears streaming down her face, started clapping. Soon, the whole room was applauding, not for the Sinclair family, not for the dynasty, but for the end of the lies. I didn't bow. I just turned to my grandfather, took his hand, and squeezed it. "Happy birthday, Grandpa," I whispered. He squeezed back, his grip strong. "Best gift I ever got." The silence in the ballroom following my declaration was fragile, like a sheet of glass vibrating under a high-pitched frequency. Julian stood near the exit where the security guards had momentarily paused, his chest heaving, his face a mask of primal, cornered panic. He looked at the USB drive in my hand as if it were a loaded gun pointed at his temple. "Give me that drive," Julian snarled, his voice guttural and unrecognizable. He shook off the guards with a burst of frantic strength that only a man facing life in prison could muster. He didn't run for the door. He ran for me. He crossed the parquet floor in 3 strides, his hand outstretched, his eyes fixed on the silver device. I did not move. I did not flinch. I simply watched him come, calculating the distance, waiting for the impact. But the impact never came. A massive hand clamped onto Julian's shoulder, stopping him dead in his tracks with the force of a hydraulic press. It was Stone, Grandpa Arthur's head of personal security, a man who had been a silent shadow in the corner of the room all evening. I had sent a text to Stone 30 minutes ago the moment I left the bathroom with Alyssa. The message had been simple, code red: "Protect the evidence." Stone spun Julian around and shoved him back. Julian stumbled, crashing into a waiter's station. Silverware clattered to the floor, a cacophony of metal against wood that made the guests jump. "Stay down, Julian," Stone said, his voice deep and devoid of emotion. "Do not make me hurt you in front of the senator." "You work for me," Julian screamed, spitting saliva. "I sign your checks. Get her. She stole company property." "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria, "I am about to show everyone exactly whose checks you have been signing." I turned back to the laptop connected to the main screen. I plugged the USB drive into the port. The screen flickered, shifting from the damning video of the rehearsal to a stark, white interface. It was the internal banking portal for Sinclair Holdings. "Look at the screen," I commanded. A spreadsheet appeared, dense with numbers. I highlighted a column in bright yellow. "This is not a charitable trust for the wetlands," I explained, pointing to the projection. "This is a wire transfer schedule dated for next Monday. $5 million. The destination account is in the Cayman Islands. The beneficiary: a shell corporation called Phoenix Gaming Solutions." I clicked to the next slide. It was a chain of emails between Julian and a known loan shark based in Las Vegas. "If I do not get the deed to the lake house by Saturday night, they are going to break my legs." I read aloud from the screen, quoting Julian's own words. "My grandfather is senile. I can get him to sign anything. Just give me 48 hours. A collective gasp went through the room. It was the sound of air being sucked out of 30 lungs simultaneously. "He is not opening a charity," I said, turning to face the room. "He is trying to transfer the ownership of this estate, this house, this land, my grandfather's legacy to a shell company to pay off $5 million in gambling debts and embezzlement covers. He was going to mortgage the ground beneath your feet, Grandpa, and then default on it." I looked directly at the two men from Vanguard Holdings. They were already on their feet. The tall one, the senior partner, was buttoning his jacket with a look of absolute distaste. "Mr. Sinclair," the partner said, addressing my father. "Robert. Vanguard Holdings does not do business with criminals, and we certainly do not do business with families that defraud their own elders." "Wait," my father pleaded, stepping forward, his hands shaking. "Please, it is a misunderstanding. We can explain. Julian he has been under stress." "The deal is dead," the partner said coldly. "Consider the letter of intent rescinded effective immediately, and expect a call from our compliance officers regarding the due diligence fees. You wasted our time." They turned and walked out, their footsteps echoing the death knell of the Sinclair empire. Julian watched them go, his eyes wide and hollow. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw true fear, not the fear of getting caught, but the fear of consequences. "You killed the company," Julian whispered. "You crazy witch. You killed us all." "I saved the house," I corrected him. Then, a sound came from the head of the table, a sharp, loud crack. Grandpa Arthur had slammed his open palm onto the mahogany table. He pushed himself up from his wheelchair. The oxygen tube had fallen from his nose, but he didn't seem to notice. He stood on his own 2 feet, shaky but upright, looking taller than he had in years. The frail old man act had evaporated, burned away by the heat of pure, righteous fury. "Sit down, Arthur," my mother cried out, rushing toward him. "Your heart." "Don't you touch me, Sylvia," Arthur growled. The venom in his voice stopped her cold. She froze, her hand hovering in midair. Arthur looked at Julian, who was still cowering near the waiter's station. "I suspected something was wrong," Arthur said, his voice raspy but gaining strength with every word. "I knew the accounts were light. I knew you were elusive, but I thought it was incompetence. I thought you were just stupid." He took a breath, his chest heaving. "But this," Arthur pointed a trembling finger at the screen where Julian's emails were still displayed. "Selling my home, stealing the pension fund from Mrs. Higgins, from the Gardners, plotting to rob me while pretending to celebrate my life." "Grandpa, please." Julian started to sob, realizing the game was truly up. "I had to. I was in deep. They were going to kill me." "Then you should have come to me like a man," Arthur roared. The sound filled the ballroom, shaking the crystal drops on the chandelier. "You should have faced your mistakes instead. You tried to sell my flesh and blood. You tried to frame your sister. You are rot. Julian, you are a cancer in this family." Arthur turned to look at the lawyer, who was frantically trying to shove papers back into his briefcase. "Mr. Henderson," Arthur barked. "You are fired. Get out of my house before I have you disbarred for collusion." The lawyer fled. Arthur turned his gaze to my parents. Robert and Sylvia shrank under his stare. They looked like children caught standing over a broken vase. "And you too," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. You knew he was stealing. You knew he was gambling. And instead of stopping him, instead of protecting this family, you helped him. You rehearsed a play in a hallway to trick my granddaughter. "We wanted to save the name," my father whispered, his face gray. "We didn't want the scandal." "You have no name," Arthur spat. "Not anymore. As of this moment, Julian is removed from all positions within Sinclair Holdings. I am exercising my right as the majority shareholder to dissolve the board." He paused, looking at them with eyes that were no longer blue, but the color of steel. "And I am rewriting my will tomorrow morning. Julian gets nothing. Robert, Sylvia, you get nothing. You have your house in the city. Good. I suggest you learn to like it, because the allowance stops tonight. The trust stops tonight. You are on your own." "Dad, you can't," my mother screamed, falling to her knees. "We have mortgages. We have bills. We will be destitute." "Then get a job," Arthur yelled. "Like Colette did. Like I did." The brutality of the sentence hung in the air. The guests were motionless, witnessing the dismantling of a dynasty in real time. "This is all her fault," Julian screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She planned this. She is jealous because I was the favorite. She wants the money for herself. She is a snake. She is a hero," a voice said from the back of the room. We all turned. Alyssa stepped forward. She was still trembling, but her head was high. She walked past the guests, past my parents, until she stood next to me. "She didn't do this for the money, Julian," Alyssa said, her voice shaking but clear. "She did it to save us, to save me." "Shut up, Alyssa," Julian hissed. "Go home." "No," Alyssa said. She looked at the crowd. "He talks about family unity. He talks about love. But do you want to know how he treats his family when the cameras aren't rolling?" She reached up and unclasped the diamond choker around her neck. She let it fall to the floor. Then, she pulled down the collar of her expensive blue dress. Gasps of horror erupted from the room. On her collarbone, stark and purple against her pale skin, were bruises, finger marks, the shape of a hand that had grabbed her too hard, too often. "He did this because I asked him to stop gambling," Alyssa said, tears streaming down her face. "He threatened to take my daughter away if I didn't help him lie to you. Arthur, he is not a businessman. He is a monster." Julian looked around the room. He saw the disgust on every face. He saw the senator turning his back. He saw the socialites recoiling. He had lost the narrative. He had lost the audience. He let out a scream of pure, impotent rage and lunged for Alyssa, but before he could take a single step, the double doors of the ballroom burst open. Red and blue lights flooded the hallway, bouncing off the chandeliers, turning the elegant room into a crime scene. "Police!" a voice shouted. "Everybody stay where you are!" 6 officers in tactical gear stormed the room, followed by 2 detectives in suits. I recognized the lead detective. I had sent him the email package exactly 30 minutes ago, timed perfectly to arrive just as the party was hitting its peak. "Julian Sinclair?" the detective asked. Scanning the room, Stone, the bodyguard, shoved Julian forward. "This is him. Julian Sinclair. You are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud," the detective recited, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. No, wait," Julian stammered, backing away. "It is a mistake. My sister, she hacked my computer. She planted it." The detective grabbed Julian's arm, spinning him around. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. "You have the right to remain silent," the detective said, pushing Julian toward the door. "And I suggest you use it, because we have your emails. Mr. Sinclair, we have the bank records. We have everything. My mother let out a wail that sounded like an animal in a trap. She collapsed fully onto the floor, her beige chiffon dress pooling around her like a shroud. She clutched at my father's legs, but he didn't move. He stood there, watching his son being dragged away, watching his reputation disintegrate, watching his life end. They walked Julian past me. He stopped for a second, fighting the officers. He looked at me. His eyes were wet, wild, filled with hatred and confusion. "Why?" he croaked. "Why did you do it?" I looked at him. I looked at the brother who had let me take the fall for his first crime. The brother who had rehearsed crying to manipulate me. The brother who had beaten his wife and stolen from the poor. "Because, Julian," I said softly, so only he could hear. "I checked the footage. You were crying too early." The officers shoved him forward. "Let's go," the detective said. I watched them drag him out into the night, the flashing lights casting long, dancing shadows across the room. The party was over. The music had stopped. The champagne was warm. My parents were on the floor, broken. My brother was in a squad car. The guests were fleeing, whispering into their phones, eager to be the first to break the scandal on social media. I turned to Grandpa Arthur. He had sunk back into his wheelchair, exhausted, his face pale but peaceful. I knelt beside him. "Are you okay?" I asked. He looked at the door where Julian had vanished. Then he looked at me. He reached out and took my hand. "I have lost a grandson," he whispered, "and I have lost a son." He paused, looking at Alyssa, who was being comforted by Stone. "But I think," Arthur said, squeezing my fingers, "I have finally found my family." I rested my head on his knee. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a deep, heavy fatigue. But under the fatigue, there was something else, a lightness, the weight of the secrets, of the lies, of the years of silence. It was all gone. The checkmate was complete, the king had fallen, and the board was finally clear. 30 days have passed since the night the lights went out on the Sinclair dynasty. In the movies, the aftermath of a family explosion is usually depicted as a montage of courtrooms and press conferences. In reality, it is much quieter. It is a series of phone calls, paperwork, and the slow, grinding machinery of consequence. I drove up to Lake Geneva one last time yesterday. The iron gates were open, but the security guard was gone. A large wooden sign had been hammered into the lawn, right next to the prize-winning hydrangeas my grandmother used to tend. It read, "Property for sale by auction. All proceeds to benefit the Sinclair Employee Restitution Fund." Grandpa Arthur did not waste a single second. The morning after the party, while Julian was still being processed at the county jail, Arthur liquidated the estate. He sold the cars. He sold the art. He sold the silver. And he put the house on the market with a stipulation that the sale must happen within 60 days. Every single penny was earmarked to repay the $3 million Julian had stolen from the pension fund, with the remainder going to pay off the debts Julian had accrued with the loan sharks to ensure they did not come after the rest of us. It was a fire sale of a legacy, and it was the most honorable thing the Sinclair name had done in 50 years. I did not go inside the house. I did not need to see the empty rooms or the shadows where I used to hide. I just sat in my car at the end of the driveway and watched a for sale sign flutter in the wind. I felt a strange sense of loss. Not for the house itself, but for the childhood I should have had there. But mostly, I felt relief. The house had been a mausoleum for a long time. Now, it was just a building. My parents did not take it as well. Robert and Sylvia were evicted from the city townhouse 3 days after the party. It turned out Julian had leveraged that property too, forging their signatures just as he had forged mine. But unlike me, they had willfully ignored the red flags. They had signed blank documents because they could not be bothered to read the fine print. They are currently living in a 2-room rental apartment in a strip mall complex near the airport. It is the kind of place with thin walls and fluorescent lighting in the hallways. I know this not because I visited, but because my mother left me 14 voicemails in the first week. The first few were angry. She called me a traitor. She called me a snake. She said I had humiliated them in front of the senator and that I was an ungrateful daughter who destroyed her brother's life. Then, the tone shifted. The anger turned to bargaining. "Colette, please." Her voice cracked on the fifth message. "Your father is depressed. He won't get out of bed. We don't have a car. Can you just send us $5,000 just to get us settled? We are your parents." I listened to it while drinking my morning coffee. I felt a pang of guilt, a sharp, instinctive tug in my chest. That was the conditioning. That was the button they had installed in me since birth. Family helps family. But then I remembered the rehearsal. I remembered the Vizine. I remembered them standing by while Julian tried to frame me for a felony. I did not delete the messages. I archived them, just in case, but I blocked their numbers. I am not responsible for their wreckage. They are adults. They have hands. They can work. It is a hard lesson to learn at 60 years old, but it is the only lesson left for them. As for Julian, he is currently being held without bail. The flight risk was deemed too high given his offshore accounts and his desperate attempts to flee the night of the party. His trial is set for next year. I will be subpoenaed to testify. So will Alyssa. Alyssa. She filed for divorce 48 hours after the police took Julian away. She sent me a text message last week. It was a photo of her and her daughter sitting on a beach in Florida. They looked windblown and sunburnt. Alyssa wasn't wearing makeup. She looked 5 years younger. "Thank you," the caption read, "for giving me the match to burn it down." I didn't reply. She doesn't need me anymore. She needs to heal, and part of that healing is forgetting the Sinclairs existed. I hope she never looks back. My final stop in Wisconsin wasn't the house. It was a place called the Cedars. It is a senior living community about 10 miles from the estate. It is not a palace. It is a nice, clean, comfortable place with a garden full of birds and a staff that actually smiles. Grandpa Arthur moved there voluntarily. He said he was tired of living in a museum. He wanted a room where he could reach the bookshelf without a ladder and a television that didn't require 3 remote controls. I found him sitting on the patio, wrapped in a knitted blanket, playing chess with a man named Saul. "Checkmate in 3, Arthur said as I approached. "You are a ruthless old pirate," Saul grumbled, but he was smiling. Arthur looked up and saw me. His face lit up, not with the frantic desperation of the birthday party, but with a genuine, settled warmth. "Colette," he said, waving me over. "Come here. Tell Saul he's about to lose his bishop." We spent the afternoon drinking Earl Grey tea and watching the squirrels fight over acorns. We didn't talk about Julian. We didn't talk about the trial. We talked about books. We talked about the weather. We talked about my job at the archives. When the sun started to dip low, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple, Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out a small brass key. "I have something for you," he said. I tensed up immediately. "Grandpa, I told you. I don't want the money. Give it to the pension fund. Give it to charity." "It is not money," Arthur said, shaking his head. "I know better than to offer you cash. Colette, you are too proud for that. And frankly, Sinclair money is cursed." He pressed the key into my palm. It was cold and heavy. "This is for the storage unit in town," he said. "Before the auctioneers came, Mrs. Higgins and I moved some things out. The first editions, the maps, the leather-bound journals I kept when I started the company in 1974. I looked at the key, my throat tightening. "You are an archivist," Arthur said softly. "You save history. Well, this is the only history of this family that is worth saving. It is yours. Do what you want with it. Keep it, sell it, burn it, but it belongs to you." I closed my fingers around the key. "I will keep it." "Good," Arthur said. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. He looked tired, but it was a good tired, the exhaustion of a man who has finally put down a heavy load. "You know, Colette, everyone always said Julian was the image of me, but they were wrong." He opened one eye and winked. "You are the one with my spine." I kissed him on the forehead and left him there in the garden. Safe and sound. He has a bad heart, and the doctors say he might not have many years left. But the years he has will be honest, and that is worth more than the estate ever was. I drove back to Chicago in silence. When I unlocked the door to my apartment, the air inside felt different. For the last year, this place had been a bunker, a hideout, a temporary station where I waited for the other shoe to drop. Now, it just felt like home. My fiddle-leaf fig had sprouted a new leaf while I was gone. The stack of library books on my coffee table was waiting to be read. The silence wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. Then, I picked up my phone. I opened the Ring app. The video was still there. Motion detected. Thursday, 8:47 p.m. I tapped on it. The thumbnail showed the three of them standing in the hallway. My father looking at his shoes, my mother clutching her purse, Julian checking his watch. I watched it one last time. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I didn't even feel the satisfaction of revenge. I just felt a profound sense of distance. They looked like strangers. They looked like characters in a movie I had watched a long time ago. People whose drama no longer had the power to reach through the screen and touch me. Revenge, I realized, isn't about making people suffer. It is about removing their power to hurt you. It is about holding up a mirror and letting them destroy themselves with their own reflection. Julian destroyed himself with greed. My parents destroyed themselves with cowardice. I survived with the truth. I tapped the trash icon. Are you sure you want to delete this video? This action cannot be undone. I am sure, I said aloud. I pressed delete. The video vanished. The cloud storage was empty. The evidence was gone because the case was closed. I put the phone down on the counter. I didn't need the recording to know what happened. I didn't need the proof to justify my existence. I walked to the French doors that opened onto my tiny balcony. I stepped out into the cool Chicago night. The city was alive below me, a grid of golden lights stretching out to the horizon. I could hear the distant hum of traffic, the wail of a siren, the laughter of a group of friends walking down the street. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sharp, cold air. It tasted like winter was coming. But for the first time in 32 years, I wasn't afraid of the cold. I had my job. I had my grandfather's books. I had my self-respect. I was Colette Sinclair. And I was finally free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know families can be complicated, and sometimes standing up for yourself feels like the hardest thing in the world. But I hope my journey reminds you that your peace is worth fighting for. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a quiet room like mine? Or are you on your commute? Let me know in the comments below, and share your own thoughts on how you handle toxic relationships. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Healing Drama Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this message of strength with more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong and take care of yourselves.